This episode's brought to you by Magic Spoon. Go to magicspoon.com/movies and use promo code movies for a special offer. And stay tuned after the video for more info. Hello everybody and welcome to my review for episodes 3 and 4 of The Acolyte, which are now airing on Disney+. After watching episode 3 last week, I made the decision that this might be a series that lends itself maybe to reviews every 2 episodes or so because of the unfolding story and because we're learning new chunks of information. So I decided to wait. I'll probably do another check-in after the next 2 and then another one at the end of the season. Before I jump into the review, just a quick reminder, we're now only a couple days away from an event that I'm doing with my good buddy Christian Harloff live in New York City at a venue called the Green Room 42. You can check the description below to find out how to get tickets. If you could be there in person, that's great. We'll also be doing a live stream so you can watch from home. But yeah, I'm excited to get back to New York and I would love to see you out there. We're going to be talking movies, taking questions, and I think it's going to be a really good time. So let's loop back first to episode 3 from last week. And you know, I'm just going to do spoilers throughout here. So if you haven't seen the episodes, you should probably pause and watch them. Or if you don't care, you can just keep watching because pretty much everything I have to say about the show really does have to go into plot details. Last week's episode apparently caused quite a stir. I have to say I wasn't fatally offended at the concept of Force using witches. I remember way back when Force Awakens was being developed, there were rumors of Sith witches. So I think that's been part of the mythology for a while. And honestly, the issues that I've had with the show don't really have much to do with the characters that are included in them. It's more of just the actual show itself, some of the writing, some of the acting, etc., which is what we're going to talk about. In that third episode, which was a full flashback episode, we met the young versions of Osha and May and their disagreement about the Force and what they wanted to do. And I do think that the argument that they had with each other was a little, I guess, simplistic. I mean, literally saying,
"The Jedi are bad.
The Jedi are good."
That is prequel level writing. From my point of view, the Jedi are evil type dialogue. And as I said in my last review, I understand that some people say that, well, that's typical of Star Wars, but I don't necessarily think that means it should be fully embraced. It is odd that the whole setup for Osha and May's past seems to embrace two concepts that caused a lot of disagreement among the fan base in previous iterations of Star Wars. You have the Rian Johnson approach of we're going to challenge the conventions of good and evil, and what if the Jedi aren't really good, and what if these Sith really weren't all that bad?
This isn't about good or bad. This is about power and who is allowed to use it.
And then you also have the inclusion of things from the prequels like midichlorians and the idea of immaculate conception. I think that, you know, I get where it's coming from. I mean, I did chuckle a bit at the idea of the Jedi strolling into this coven and saying, you can't take children and train them in the Force. That's our job. That's what we do. The jury's still out on a lot of these things, but it does seem like one of the aims of this show is to sort of make everything shades of gray, so it's not, you know, the dark side and the light side of the Force, which is something that you can do. It's been done in previous Star Wars movies and shows in the past. It is a controversial thing because there are going to be some people who love it and some people who don't love it so much. I would say that the big difference here is that when it works or has worked in Star Wars in the past, they've been projects that have a lot more finesse than this one does. I didn't do a full standalone review of episode 3, largely because it's very obvious that this is a mystery story, and so we're going to learn things slowly as we flash back and forward through time. And we're obviously being led to believe right now that May started the fire that killed everyone in the Coven, but she was either wielding the world's most powerful lamp, or there's more to this story than we know. And it's a rule of thumb that if you see a possible explanation for something and then there's a little bit of a time gap and then it looks like something happens that was a direct result of that person's actions, it may not actually have been the result of their actions. If it was May and this impossibly flammable lamp that did start the fire and kill everybody, then I think that that's a bit of a disappointing answer to that mystery that was set up at the beginning of the show. But I just really heavily suspect that we are going to return to that series of events and we're going to learn more about it. Supposedly one of the influences on this series was Rashomon, which is the same event through multiple perspectives. And so I'm willing to give the story a little bit of credit. I'm like, all right, I'm going to see where this goes, because I don't think that episode 3 is as full of answers as some others seem to believe that it is. I will say that I haven't been particularly impressed with the performances of the actors playing Osha and May really at any age so far. And really, Amanda Stenberg is the actor that we see the most, and she's done some really good work, but I think she's hamstrung a little bit by the dialogue in this show, especially when she's playing Osha. I feel like she's kind of fallen into that Anakin Skywalker trap of just not being able to sell the script that she's been given, because I know that both Hayden Christensen and Amanda Stenberg are capable of much, much stronger work than we've seen in their respective projects, or at least for Hayden Christensen in the prequels. I think he's certainly done a great redemption tour and shown us a lot more to Anakin in the years after. It isn't easy to sell that sort of dialogue, and I think the fact that Amanda Stenberg's performance as May is better than her performance as Osha is evidence of that, because I think that May is a better written character with more complexity to her. I think that Osha just doesn't really have that many dimensions yet beyond, being the good sister. So episode 3 for me really was just kind of taking in the first chapter of this flashback and hopefully not the answer to the overall mystery. And then we have last night's episode 4, which was much more frustrating for me. First of all, because of the length. When you look at the length of the episode, it's a 34 quote-unquote minute episode, but really when you take out all the credits and you take out the recap, it was about 26 minutes long, which is only a couple minutes longer than your average network multicam sitcom episode. And it was a short episode that had the combination, I think, of not really doing much and also ending on a big cliffhanger. I think you can have shorter episodes if you're doing more in them, but there just didn't seem to be much to it. When they found all those bugs in the forest and one of them took off and Soul sliced it with a lightsaber, I'm like, okay, we're gonna get this group of Jedi versus all these crazy forest flying bugs. That sounds like a pretty decent action sequence, but then that just didn't really happen. Episode length should be dictated by story, but I don't think that the story fit the length of this episode. In the bygone days of network TV, you used to be obligated to produce around 22 episodes a season, and so you would have these different ones that kind of felt like filler, or felt like, okay, well, the writers just had to come up with something to talk about this week. But we're not in that era anymore. We're in the streaming era. It's an era where you can make shows be as many episodes as you want. You can make shows be as long as you want them to be. And when you're doing a show, especially on a week-to-week release, I just don't think it was a good idea to make an episode this short that ends the way that it did. And I have a conspiracy theory. I know that's crazy, someone with a conspiracy theory about Star Wars and or Disney, but I do know that some critics were sent the first 4 episodes of the show for review purposes. I didn't see any of them before, but I know a lot of people saw those first 4. And part of me wonders if they shortened episode 4 or structured it to end on that cliffhanger in order to sort of jazz up the critics. To basically say, all right, this is the last episode you're going to see. It ends on this big action cliffhanger. Maybe that would sort of get them to go like, hey, oh man, the Acolyte. Oh, I saw the first 4 episodes and I can't wait to see more. I'm not saying that that's what did happen, but it would certainly explain why this 4th episode was the length that it was and why it did end on that big cliffhanger, which could be a good strategy for critics, but I don't really think it's the greatest strategy for people watching at home. And again, you can have shows that end on cliffhangers, but I think that you have to give people a little bit more leading into it in order for it to feel like a satisfying episode. This didn't really feel to me like much of a satisfying episode. And it wasn't just the episode length I had some issues with. There was a big plot development that I certainly hope we have a lot more to learn about, which is May's character turn of being this person that is on a quest for vengeance to somebody who decides, you know what? I'm not going to do this. I'm just going to turn myself into the Jedi and, this is the end.
What I'm going to do is surrender myself to Kelnaka and then turn myself into the Jedi.
She leaves Kamir hanging up and walks away. And, there's really no clue in this episode that that's not what's going to happen. I thought watching it when she was talking about the fact, like, I'm not going to do it. I'm just going to go. I'm like, okay, what's she setting up? What's the trick here? But she then just kind of waltzed into Kelnaka's hut and seemed ready to actually give herself up. Now, there is a possibility that maybe she was setting things up for Kelnaka to die so that she could say that she's responsible for the death of a Jedi without a weapon that involves another character that we'll talk about later. Maybe that's something that will be revealed later on. I'm still not really sure with this show if it's not as clever as it thinks it is, or if it's smart enough to lay red herrings to make us definitely think that something happened this way, but that's not the way that it happened. And I kind of have suspicions about which one it is, but I'm going to wait and see how these last 4 episodes play out. But if we don't find anything else out about this drastic character turn, then that's just going to be another thing on my list of disappointing things as far as the writing of the show. I'm basically at the point that it was so quick and so kind of out of the blue. I'm thinking that there has to be more, or else it's just a horribly written character arc. So that's going to be something that I'm looking for in the episodes coming up. What is the explanation behind this? And the show may very well give us that explanation. Honestly, this list of things that I keep saying, okay, well, the show better give us an explanation for this, or else it's going to be really disappointing, is getting longer and longer. And I mean, the optimist in me is really working overtime with this show. One thing that's not in dispute is that Kilnaka is dead. Killed off screen, no less. The second cool Jedi in this series that's killed moments after they're introduced in the present day. And yes, I know that we are certainly going to see more of Kilnaka in flashbacks, but I was really excited for this character. I think in my first review, I said, this has the potential to be an all-time fan favorite character, and he's gone from our present timeline before we really see him do anything. And so now when we see the character, it's all going to be with the knowledge that he's on borrowed time. He doesn't really go forward from this one fixed point in time. And for this to be the second time that they've done that, it feels like you're recycling a bit of a beat or a plot beat. We'll see if there's any further explanation. I'm sure we're going to find out who it was that killed him. But I don't know if I'm really that much of a fan, because I was excited by the concept of a Wookiee Jedi on screen. Of course, the cliffhanger of the episode revolves around the arrival of what appears to be a Sith, though whether or not this is the Sith Master has yet to be determined. I'm almost sure it's not. And it seems pretty obvious that it's Khmer, right? I mean, he was pushing May to keep going with her mission and kind of saying like, well, you know, it's not really a test. You should really go through with this. And then they did the thing that is always a tell as far as a big reveal, which is that he's left alone and unsupervised. And then a mystery person shows up and you're like, oh, who is that? 9 times out of 10, it's the character in the show who was left alone and unsupervised. And I felt a little bit like those moments in the Superman comics when, you know, Superman shows up and somebody turns around and goes like, oh, hey, where's Clark Kent? That's sort of how I felt last night. It's like, well, there's one major character that we left alone in the woods. So I think the odds are pretty likely that it is that character. And there's really 2 ways that this could go. Number 1, they telegraphed it in a really obvious way. Or number 2, they kind of set up a red herring for us to think it's him, but it's not actually him. And I guess we'll probably see in a week or 2 which one of these wins out. It could be that this is the answer to the May character mystery. Maybe she knew what was actually going on and she basically told him a false plan in order to get him to go kill Kilnaka so that she wouldn't have to, and then she could report back like, hey, I was responsible for the death, but I didn't have to use a weapon. That's a possibility. She kind of had that moment where she looked up and was like, oh, okay. That's why I say I'm not really going to pass final judgment on anything with the show plot-wise just yet, because they are rolling things out slowly week by week. I think that it's risky because there are going to be a lot of fans that are turned on by it, not in the weird way, and then there are going to be a lot of fans that are frustrated by it. And I have to say I'm a little more frustrated by it so far than I am intrigued by it. But, you know, we'll see what the developments are in later episodes. There's also some lore stuff in the episode, like the appearance of Ki-Adi-Mundi, which I've already heard is apparently prior to his canonical birth date. Maybe he and Professor McGonagall used the same time turner to turn up earlier in the lore than they were supposed to based on what people thought of their birth dates. I don't know. That's the thing with lore and deep lore and stuff like that. There are people out there who are much better at that stuff than I am, and they run great channels. I am usually the plot guy, the story guy, the reaction guy. I am not the lore guy, so there may very well be a lore answer that is able to put this mystery back together, or maybe they just didn't have the budget for a CGI and or puppet Yoda, so they had to keep the High Council out of the picture. I don't know. You let me know. Go research. I'm going to put you to work. Go research and let me know why. Honestly, 4 episodes in, at best, it seems like The Acolyte is going to be an extremely backloaded show. We're mainly just setting up things to explain later, which will work if the payoff is worth it. There is a lot of pressure on these last episodes, and I haven't been particularly impressed with the writing on the show thus far, but I'm still not ready to write the show off just yet. I am an optimist, and I'm not, as some people might say, a Disney shill or whatever. I'm not out here saying like, oh no guys, please keep watching The Acolyte. I really would like for it to turn out good because I like good shows. Why would anybody want to waste their time watching a bad show? I hope this doesn't go down the bad show road. It may very well. And I will say that if these last episodes don't satisfactorily resolve a lot of these mysteries from the first few episodes, my opinion of the show is going to plummet rapidly because there's a lot of stuff that I'm kind of going like, all right, we'll see. That if it doesn't turn out well, it's just going to kind of all compound. And then retroactively, I think those disappointments are going to kick in for the early episodes. And that's why I say there is so much pressure in how they're going to resolve this. This was a choice. It was a choice to set the show up this way. You have to know if it's a mystery that you're going to put that pressure on the back end. And I think that the real thing that we have yet to prove is whether the writers of the show are up to the task. A lot of people are probably screaming and have been screaming at their monitors that no, they're not. I'm still willing to wait and see. It is tough, though, with the show. It feels like a lot of times they take one step forward, 2 steps back. I was watching last night, and they were out in this beautiful, misty location, and I said to myself, oh, wow, that's so great that they're shooting on location and they're shooting outside because I'm so tired of them being in the volume. And then they literally cut to the rest of the episode on Star Trek sets inside the volume. I'm like, well, isn't this just the way this show works? Is I'm like, oh, okay, I like that. And then the next thing is like, oh, I'm not so sure about that one. So if we're looking at my updated ranking or rating of the season, on my personal scale, it is still squarely in the it's fine category. And I think that these next episodes are going to be very influential as far as whether that moves up or moves down very rapidly. What do you think, though? What do you think of the show so far? Let me know down in the comments below. And before we go, I want to thank the sponsor for this episode, Magic Spoon. This episode is brought to you by Magic Spoon. I am a cereal addict, no joke. I eat cereal for one meal almost every day of the week. But as you get older, it's important to watch out for stuff like sugar and empty carbs when you eat. That's why I'm glad I have Magic Spoon stocked in my pantry. I have the Magic Spoon variety pack that contains 4 flavors, cocoa, fruity, frosted, and peanut butter. This pack has 0 grams of sugar, 13 to 14 grams of protein, and 4 to 5 grams of net carbs with only 140 calories per serving. It's also high protein, keto-friendly, gluten-free, grain-free, and soy-free. It's hard to choose, but my go-to is the fruity flavor. It has that great taste I remember from when I was a kid, but with more protein and less sugar. And it stays crunchy in milk for as long as I'm eating it, which is always a bonus for any cereal aficionado. It's great to know that I can have my cereal, eat it too, and stay conscious of my carb and sugar intake. Go to magicspoon.com/movies to grab a variety pack and try it today, and be sure to use our promo code MOVIES at checkout to save $5 off your order. And Magic Spoon is so confident in their product, it's backed with a 100% happiness guarantee. So if you don't like it for any reason, they'll refund your money, no questions asked. Remember, start your day off right with a delicious bowl of high-protein cereal at magicspoon.com/movies and use the code MOVIES to save $5 off. Thanks to Magic Spoon for sponsoring this episode, and thank you so much for watching. Be sure to stay tuned right here for more movie news, reviews, box office, and more. Until next time, stay safe, and I'll see you then. Bye.